You ever see a tournament list and think it's just gonna carry you straight through the ladder? Because you're looking at the deck and you see the placements and you see the players behind it and your brain goes straight to one idea. Yo, this deck is busted, I'm gonna farm. So you go down that path, you play the deck a little while, and after about a half an hour, you're down cubes. And you're wondering, how did the best players in the world look absolutely beyond unstoppable with a deck that feels like in your hands, it just crumbles and just completely falls apart? So this is one of the most common misunderstandings about decks right now in Marvel Snap. Because remember, tournament decks and ladder decks are not the same experience. They're not built the same way. They don't follow the same rules. They don't solve the same problems. They don't care about the same things. They're built with the idea they have different goals. So today, I want to break down why top tournament lists very often don't hit on ladder and in the way that you expect, and how to understand what makes a list powerful in one setting and why it makes it shaky in the other. Because if you learn this as we go through and we hopefully see more tournaments in the near future, it's going to save you cubes and sanity, because you're trying to operate this beautiful, beautiful deck and then all of a sudden it just falls apart. Let's talk about why right now. So here's the first truth that most players miss with this. Tournament play and ladder are they look similar, right? Obviously, but they're not the same experience. Even Conquest and Tournament is different in and of itself because they have two completely different goals. Tournament players are building for things like very specific targeted matchups, predictable opponents that they are highly expecting to see, and then also per match gain long-term and long-form information. So they test for specific opponents in a very, very defined field. They look for tendencies and they build lineups that work with and against those tendencies, versus ladder, which gives you the complete opposite end of things, right? Ladder gives you complete randomness. You get unpredictable skill levels, you get losing streaks, and then you end up in swings of tilt. And look, between the bots, experimental lists that people are trying out, and everything else in between, it's just absolute matchup chaos. So a tournament player is asking one question: how do I beat the very specific exact opponent, or the one that I'm expecting to face specifically in the next few hours? And a ladder player is trying to compete against chaos. That's really the only way to describe it, because you never know what you're going to be paired up against next. So they're two very different goals that create two very different deck philosophies. And the tournament deck was never meant for ladder environments. Let's be clear on that. Tournament lists function like very specific precision tools because they're not built to be just generically good. They're built to be specifically perfect for a very limited set of opponents. So the times that we've seen like an incredibly weird tech card in the top 8, and you just kind of look at it and go, why is Quake here? Why is this so random? It shouldn't have been here. That card may have been the reason that that player survived to that exact round, because they needed that specific card to make the very deep run. Now, a tournament deck can afford to do this and be much more narrow in comparison to a ladder deck, because on ladder, precision breaks the moment you meet a deck with the list you were never designed for. That's just how it works, because a single curveball matchup and the perfect plan that you have for it collapses. Think of how many times you're playing a destroy deck and then turn 2, they Cosmo armor followed by Cosmo on 3. You know what I mean. It happens. Precision helps in tournaments versus the volume, which is what helps, generally speaking, on ladder. Remember that ladder is volume. It's repetition, dozens of games across a massive range of opponents. The strongest decks on ladder win because they draw reliably. They have flexible lines and they can pivot when they're disrupted. They don't rely on niche, I think is the better way to look at it. It's a pressure early, stable late style build. And tournament lists don't need to do much of that consistently. They only need to perform when the window matters, when they can maximize the most. Ladder, it's more of like a marathon. It's reliable, it's durable, it paces well, but a tournament deck can absolutely and should absolutely be built more like a sprinter. It has targets, it can be explosive. That's the kind of gameplay that wins tournaments, not Risk, explosiveness, because you do not run a marathon wearing sprint spikes. Now, tournament lists, they almost always include more tech cards than I think you might feel comfortable with sometimes. Sometimes you see upwards of 4. Typically, I've been a fan of 2. Sometimes you may only need 1. And you know what happens? Reddit sees that, and then everyone goes into chaos mode. These are the auto-include tech cards. Throw them into every deck. Everyone needs them. No. Okay, tech cards exist in tournament decks to beat a very specific single opponent or single archetype or single card because the bracket is more so being projected and defined. They're not meant for the wider range of assortment that you see generally on ladder, because a tech card that wins 1 tournament round can lose you 15 ladder matches just because your core is weakened in your ladder deck because you're trying to plan for everything else at the same time. So tournament players bring specific tech cards because they have a better idea of who they're facing. On ladder, you don't. Tournament players get more out of a deck than most ladder players ever will. They know every line, they know every pivot point, they know how to squeeze value out of hands that most people are going to retreat on. So that way, when they use a slightly higher risk list, they can pivot it at a level and a specific moment where risk becomes manageable. They know how to snap well. They can retreat without ego getting into the way. They sequence to dodge very specific counters from that targeted meta. So you can give a normal driver a Formula 1 car, but that doesn't mean they know how to race it. Tournament decks are very often incredibly fine-tuned machines for a specific course. One mistake can break the entire plan, and if you're not familiar with the lines, it's a razor-thin margin for you to take that skill and translate it into ladder. It's weird. You're gonna feel that difference every single game with a tournament deck, I guarantee it. And the part of it that so many people don't even recognize with that is that tournament decks are very often built differently than the cube farmers of ladder, right? They're built for survival, long form match play with a very targeted list of opponents. Tournament formats reward controlled boards, slow lines, information gathering, safe wins for 1 or 2 along the way. They don't reward 8 cube explosions the same way. They just don't. So ladder is going to reward fast pressure, early snaps, pivot turns, and forcing cubes when the window basically appears. Tournament lists are built differently because they're built to avoid losing, while ladders are pushing a win. I hope you understand the difference between that because it is very different tools and mindsets to work with on 2 different decks. Again, because remember, tournament players know their field. They know who's in the bracket. They know the decks that are probably expected during that specific meta. They know the lanes and the lines as they're most likely to appear versus ladder, which is going to give you, all right, here's Patriot, Hella, move, bounce, bots, a wrong snap, random brew, and your perfect counter, and then you can dominate the next match. Like, it's just tournament lists aren't built for that. They're not built to handle that amount of randomness. They're built for that very linear predictability. You can't take a deck that's designed to defeat 5 specific decks and expect it to handle thousands of strangers playing whatever the hell they feel like that morning, yet alone the next morning or a different morning. So here's what I recommend. Take a tournament list and use it as a starting point for getting inspired for what to bring on ladder, not the actual list itself. Ask yourself, what is the deck actually trying to do? What matchup was it built to handle? Which tech cards can be adjusted to handle that chaos and randomness versus the targeting? Ask how this list was consistent on a tournament setting, but you can make it more random to handle the ladder chaos encounters. So don't copy the deck, translate the deck, adjust it, because tournament lists should be treated like blueprints for you. You might need to change the shape, edge out a little something over here, smoothen this out, widen this plant, but you're not defeating the list and degrading what it was. You're adapting it for a different pool of potential. So the next time you see the top 16, top 8, something comes out as a published list of great decks, and when you're studying it, I want you to really look deeper into it and decide, what was this created for? Is it this one specific moment in this one specific bracket in this one specific matchup? Chances are it's yes, because ladder is a chaotic storm, and tournament decks are kind of built more like umbrellas for the situation, and a ladder deck is built more like a boat for the situation. You know what I mean? Like, if you bring the wrong tool to the wrong job, the results are gonna feel strange. I know it's a weird comparison, but I think you get what I'm trying to say there. So just understand where you're playing. What environment are you playing in? Because if you build for the climb that you're in, whether it's tournament or ladder, with all of that in mind, your ladder will start feeling consistent again because of the adjustments you made. So stop wasting your cubes on someone else's strategy and start winning with your own strategy because of the inspiration that you got from the tournament list of the moment. So hopefully this brings a little more clarity in regards to what you should look for these tournament lists, because I'm hopeful they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So you're going to see more posts and see more decks, and I want you to have the right information in front of you on how to assess what you just saw as being good, but in a slightly different way. Alrighty? So thank you all so much. Like, subscribe, comment, you know the drill. I'll see you next time.